He is a teacher, author, and speaker. He enjoys hiking, woodworking, classic rock, and hair metal. He hopes someday to own a Mustang, and most importantly, is a follower of Christ, a husband, and a father of two. We are so happy to have him here with us on campus and cannot wait to hear what he has to share with us. Please join me in welcoming Indiana State Teacher of the Year, Mr. Steve Perkins.
Wow. Well, thank you, and you're going to find out later. I'm going to talk about it later, but I am so excited about this talk. I'm more excited about this talk tonight than any talk I have given over the course of the last year. And that is not exaggeration at all, and a little bit later you're going to see why. But I want to start off with a short story. It's not mine, but want to read it and share it with you. They're made out of meat. 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 They're made out of meat. Meat? There's no doubt about it. We picked up several from different parts of the planet, took them aboard our recon vessels, probed them all the way through. They're completely meat. That's impossible. What about the radio signals, the messages to the stars? Oh, they use radio waves to talk, but the signals don't come from them. The signals come from machines. Well, so who made the machines? That's who we want to contact. They made the machines. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Meat made the machines. That's ridiculous. How can meat make a machine? You're asking me to believe in sentient meat. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. These creatures are the only sentient race in that sector, and they're made out of meat. No brain? Oh, there's a brain, all right. It's just that the brain is made out of meat. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So what does the thinking? You're not understanding, are you? You're refusing to deal with what I'm telling you. The brain does the thinking. The meat. Thinking meat. You're asking me to believe in thinking meat. Yes, thinking meat. Conscious meat, loving meat, dreaming meat. The meat is the whole deal. Are you beginning to get the picture? Or do I have to start all over? You're serious then? They're made out of meat. Thank you. Finally, yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you. And they've been trying to get in touch with us for about 100 of their years. So what does this meat have in mind? Well, first it wants to talk to us, and then I imagine it wants to explore the universe, the usual. Oh, they actually do talk then. They use words, ideas, concepts. Oh yes, except they do it with meat. I thought you said they used radio. Oh, they do, but what do you think is on the radio? Meat sounds. You know how when you slap or flap meat, they talk by flapping their meat at each other. They can even sing by squirting air through their meat. Singing meat? Oh, this is altogether too much. So what do you advise? Officially or unofficially? Both. Officially, we are required to contact, welcome, and log in any and all sentient races in this quadrant of the universe, without prejudice, fear, or favor. Unofficially, I advise that we just erase the records and forget the whole thing. I was hoping you'd say that. How many planets are we actually dealing with here? Oh, just one. They can travel to other planets in special meat containers, but they can't live on them. So we just pretend there's no one home in the universe? That's it. Cruel, but you said it yourself. Who wants to meet meat? The humor in that story, and I saw a few people laughing, so maybe it wasn't a lot of humor, but the humor in that story, by 1990, is a 1990 story by science fiction author Terry Bisson, is that the beings who are talking are, as you may have guessed, aliens, and the creatures made out of meat are humans. When you think about it, that's exactly what we are, right? We're made out of meat. We are thinking, loving, dreaming, and yes, even singing meat. And that really has to make us pause in awe of human beings. Because have you ever known a sirloin steak to hop up and start singing the Ave Maria? It would take scientific notation to count all the chicken nuggets our children have eaten over the years. We've got a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. They eat chicken nuggets like it's crazy. I've never seen a chicken nugget once develop a mathematical theory, invent a smartphone, or paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling. I'm pretty confident that no hamburger patty that you or I has ever met will care for an orphan, roll down the street and fight injustice, or explore outer space. There has to be something different about human meat. Now, the difference, of course, between you and me versus, I don't know, cows, squid, ferrets, is that we're more than the sum of our parts. There's more going on with us. Now, that's not to say you couldn't have a charming relationship with a squid. I suppose you could. But there's an important difference. There's something more to us. And it's that something more that teachers are called to address. And it's called by many names. Some call it the spark of life. It is the soul, it's the mind, it's our consciousness. Philosophers and scientists and theologians all approach this in different ways. But what's undeniable is that the children in our classrooms, their parents, our colleagues and administrators are fearfully and wonderfully made, from our opposable thumbs to that 3-pound hunk of meat that sits inside our skulls and directs the whole operation. Human beings are incredibly interesting, wonderful. We're nowhere near discovering the limits of our own capabilities. And into that shared journey of discovery, we have been called as leaders and guides. I'm going to check this to make sure, yeah, everything's rocking and rolling up there. And I'll just tell you, all the slides have been like Twitter tested to 140 characters, so you can tweet out anything that you want. And I was just talking to somebody before, I'm just going to digress for a moment, but ed students, you've got to get on Twitter. You've got to get on Twitter, and you've got to use it as a serious feed for your profession. Get a serious Twitter handle, as I say, not Fuzzy Bunny 72 or something like that, but get a serious Twitter handle and follow serious educators, leaders in your subject areas. That's where I'm getting all of my research and news these days in education. Now, my earliest memory of the call to be a teacher, I got to tell you, goes back to kindergarten for me, which is a long time back. I'd come home from school, and one of my grandmothers had come over to the house for a visit. And I got home, and I made her a quiz. I made my grandma a quiz, and she took the quiz, and then I took out a red pen and I gleefully marked everything wrong. Because I thought that's what a teacher did, was you got out a red pen and marked stuff wrong. Now I know better, right? I should have differentiated my grandma's standard-based instruction, right? I should have tracked her growth through multiple formative assessments so I could use the data to chart the best course for her success. But back then, I thought the whole thing was just marking stuff wrong with a red pen. It was no surprise then to anybody who knew our family that I ended up becoming a teacher. I grew up in a small community in southern Indiana. New Albany was the town. And education leadership ran deeply throughout our whole family. My great aunt, my dad, my mom, all taught in the New Albany schools. And through my elementary, junior high, and high school career, that's where I spent my life. And not only was our home filled with stories of teaching, but everywhere we went, colleagues of theirs, former students, current students, would come up to them and talk to them. School always felt like an extended family for me. Something I really felt clearly my first day in 7th grade. I'll never forget it. First day in 7th grade, I'm in health class. And the principal comes in, Harry Shields. He looks around the room, and his eyes land on me. He says, "Stormin' Norman's kid." Because he and my dad, who was an elementary principal, they played golf together. And I remember that feeling of being welcomed into the family of education. I still remember each of my teachers. And believe it or not, I can still spot some aspect of every teacher I've had in my current teaching in a classroom. Matter of fact, I want to show you a few pictures. Upper left-hand corner, it's maybe a little bit hard to see, maybe you see it better on this other screen. Upper left-hand corner, the fellow in the middle is Jim Dickman. He was my high school calculus teacher. Jim was one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met. And those of you who did, I don't know if you remember logarithms and this kind of stuff. Nobody memorizes the table of mantisses when it comes to logarithms. You look that stuff up. Dude had that stuff memorized. And he's coming out with these facts. Really? And I realized the role of being a scholar in the classroom and bringing your academic best. And that's something I constantly strive to do, is bring my academic best. I was engaged in some research today with a colleague who's, I think, out in Maryland. I was hitting up other professors of classics over Facebook today with a particular question. Fired off an email to St. John's College in Cambridge about a particular textual question, and that was kind of during passing periods in lunch today. And I realized the importance of bringing that scholarly aspect of the classroom. Over on the top right, the lady there is Miss Linda DeRungs. She was my high school choir director. And we got ready for a concert, and she was telling us what we needed to wear. And, you know, guys, black pants and, you know, that kind of stuff, white shirt. And she wanted us to wear dark shoes. And I asked her, well, actually, no, she didn't say that yet. I said, what kind of shoes do you want us to wear? And she said, well, how about those gray shoes that you have, that you've worn before? I was stunned. She knew what kind of shoes I had. She had seen that and paid attention to me. I try to do that with my kids. I point out stuff that they're wearing, some cool little doodad that's hanging off their backpack, because I realize the importance of that personal touch from Miss DeRungs. Down on the bottom left is Mr. Irvin Goldstein. He was my 6th grade teacher, and this guy, we did more stuff in 6th grade. It was incredible. He prepared us so well for what we called junior high back then. It wasn't middle school. He had us writing creative stories, fiction. That really inspired me, in large part, to become a writer. We did all kinds of cool science experiments. And the diversity of activities that he brought into that 6th grade classroom is something that I try to bring into the Latin classroom. I teach Latin 1 through Latin AP. And we're the 3rd largest language out of 7 at one of the largest high schools in Indiana. And throughout all the levels, we're trying to bring in different kinds of activities in any one given period, in any one given quarter, to keep things hopping, keep things going for the kids. Bottom right corner, the lady in the picture, that's our son, Austin. And the lady there is the lady who taught just 1 year for me Latin at high school. She was my senior Latin teacher. But she teaches over in Illinois now. She continued to teach, and we're still good friends, we're still colleagues. And in fact, Austin and I went to see her last summer. And the collegial relationship that she has maintained with me, and so now the relationship that I'm having with students, and now typically it's through Facebook and Twitter and other sorts of things, but that ongoing relationship with the teacher has definitely been inspired by Miss Halverson back then. She's now Marcine Farley. I'm going to say something radical here, and I guess it's bad because it's going to be on tape. It may get me kicked out right now, so sorry in advance, and it may get me not asked back. But I learned more from those teachers and the other teachers I've had than from any professor of education that I've ever encountered. And deep down, my hunch is that's probably true for you. You've got some amazing teachers in your background that you're thinking about right now, that you're going to model your career on. Those folks taught me so much just by who they were in the classroom. And so I want to ask the question, and let it kind of percolate as you go along here. Who are the teachers, the real teachers, who taught you? Who are those people? Now, I'd long known I wanted to be a teacher, but it became my unquestioned aim in life when I took Latin with Miss Alice Rank, and that's the lady in the center of the picture, who was inducted into my high school's Hall of Fame. After experiencing Miss Rank, my life would never be the same. She was a demanding teacher. I soon grew to love her and the excitement she brought to our study of Caesar's war commentaries, Cicero's political speeches, even the conditional clauses of upper-level grammar. With her as my model, I graduated and headed off to college, knowing the path that I would take. I hope you remember her face a little bit, because we're going to come back to her a little bit later. This brings us back around to where we were. Teaching is a shared journey of discovery, and it begins with a call. In one sense, it's the calling that we all experience from our chosen discipline. And talking to some of you, we have some elementary folks, we got some math folks, we got some special ed folks. There's something, that mysterious X factor, about a certain topic or area of study that beckons us and inspires in us the longing to know more. And for me, that's been Latin. It began with a fascination with the beauty of the language in Miss Rank's high school classroom. And it's continued through an ongoing passion for the politics, the poetry, the philosophy, the military history, the general history, the architecture and the art of the Greco-Roman world. That academic discipline of classical studies called and continues to call me. So I'll ask you another question. What do you teach that you're also passionate to study? Now, from this sense of call, of course, comes the other sense, the one we typically think of when we think of vocation. Called by the subject matter, we then go forth and call others. Put simply, we want other people to experience what we've experienced. In his essay on friendship, the Roman orator Cicero wrote that the good times would not be so sweet if we did not have people who would rejoice in them with us. When I read something at night, I'm highlighting, I'm making margin notes. I can't wait to get into class the next day and share that with my students. Because education is first, foremost, and fundamental a social endeavor. It's why I love using social media. I've already talked about Twitter. But it's great to post a link to a new archaeological discovery in our Latin Club Facebook group, or pictures from a Latin Club event in that Facebook group. But at the same time, because of that social nature of education, I never want to give up the face-to-face. I got to tell you, that's why part of the reason I want to move this podium closer. I don't want to be separated from students. And it's one of the reasons I have a real hard time with independent study. Every year we have students who need to take an upper level of Latin as independent study. And I absolutely hate it. Now, not because of the creative scheduling it requires or more work on the end. That's not it. But when they do independent study, we don't get that student's voice in the classroom. We don't get them contributing to the discussion, and I miss their voice. Now, with all the means of communication that we now have at our fingertips, the question really becomes how best to help others experience what we have discovered. Fortunately, antiquity gives us a couple of words for this. From the Greeks, we get the word for teacher, pedagogus. And a pedagogus is literally a leader of children. From the Latin, we get magister, which is a master of the subject. If you put those two things together, you really get the real well-rounded definition of what a teacher is. Because as a pedagogus, we have to know where our students are in order to lead them where they need to go. But if you aren't a master of your subject, then how are you going to know where to lead them? You've got to have both. Now, most teachers naturally exhibit one aspect more than the other. I remember our first teaching assignment, my wife and I, right after we graduated college, we went to Kansas City, Missouri. We were teaching inner city middle school Latin. Mentor teacher, working with us newbies right before school starts. We met at her apartment. I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's talk about nouns, verbs, how we're teaching this stuff. First day stuff, you know. She wanted to talk about stuff that I felt was a waste of my time. She wanted to talk about classroom procedures. She wanted to talk about how to have the kids put headings on their papers. Come on. We got to get down to nouns and verbs and stuff. Yeah, I was wrong. And I realized that later. And again, it was a quote from my high school Latin teacher, Miss Rank, when she was inducted into our high school Hall of Fame. And I want to read this to you. She said, "Innate within every human being is first the desire to be noticed and to be loved. Then comes the need to be taught to learn how to learn. It's the role of the teacher to notice and, yes, to love the student so much that he's ready to learn and in turn develop all of his potential." I didn't know that back then. I know it a little bit better now. So true teachers are formed by the call of their discipline. And as they grow in their subject mastery, they become able to lead those who know nothing of it past the pitfalls and through the challenges to the joy of learning that they have experienced. Now, this is, of course, a self-correcting task. Right? In Latin 1, I have to know what the AP Latin syllabus is. I've got to know where we're going in order to navigate those pitfalls and challenges of first year. And I've found success at doing that by putting myself in the place of my students. I have to be able to see through their eyes. I've been able to do that and then help them navigate around or through their challenges. You elementary teachers, we've got a number of elementary teachers here. In fact, how many are elementary teachers? Yeah, okay, a lot of you guys. You've got to know what's going on in middle school social studies, and middle school math, and middle school English. How many middle school people we got out here? Okay, a couple folks. you got to know both of it. You've got to know what came before you at the elementary level, right? And then you've got to know what's going on at the high school level. Seeing through someone else's eyes requires a certain key trait. I want to circle back to the whole, what's different between us and just me. To see through somebody else's eyes. We have to see our students as fellow human beings. My students are not empty vessels, and neither are yours, into whom we just pour knowledge. That's not who they are. They're people. People that at least I hope will enjoy what I've discovered about the ancient world. Because to me, the classroom is a place where we get to explore and discover things together. And because we're in that shared journey of discovery, we always have to concern ourselves with what goes beyond the curriculum. There's a classical scholar, G.P. Gould. He wrote an article many years ago, and I came across this quotation, and I thought, this has to be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. He wrote, an elementary teacher, in other words, basically not college, elementary teacher, to reach in due season the end of the curriculum, must every hour turn a blind eye to serious problems and refrain from pursuing truth beyond the charted boundaries of the textbook. I couldn't disagree with that more. It's the responsibility of teachers to help students relate their learning to their own lives. And since those lives are different every single year, we can never limit ourselves to any hidebound curriculum. But we've got to see the curriculum as a starting point. Now, our classes at North Central regularly go beyond the charted boundaries of the textbook by focusing on issues of leadership and service. You realize all of our students are going to lead something someday? Every single one of them. It may be a little league team, it may be a Fortune 500 company, it may be a family. But every student is going to lead something someday. And so we're talking about issues of leadership. When we read the Odyssey, we talk about that scene, and some of you remember this, where the winds got out of the bag and blew Odysseus off course. And we talk about the fact that if Odysseus had maybe been a little bit better leader, he could have just given his men the information they needed, and that wouldn't have happened. And when we read the war accounts of Julius Caesar, we talk about some of his strategies of getting off his horse and fighting alongside his men, because he wanted his men to see that he was willing to share the same burdens that they were. And that's an essential skill for any leader of any organization. And then we take it a step further. Our numerous community service projects allow our students to put into practice the principles that they have discovered in ways that not only benefit our community, but that inspire them as well. Each year, our students read the entirety of the Iliad, the Odyssey, or the Aeneid out loud at a children's bookstore in Indianapolis. In fact, we just finished this last year doing it a couple weeks ago. It takes 12 consecutive hours of students reading in 15-minute shifts. They get pledges and donations. And over the last 7 years, we've raised over $7,000 to donate to Shepherd Community Center, which is an organization to break the cycle of poverty in Indianapolis. Inspired by that culture of service, one of our students a couple years ago, Jamie, designed a project that involves our raising money to make bears at Build-A-Bear at one of the malls. Drawing on the literary heritage then of Hesiod, Aesop, and Phaedrus, our students write individual fables for each one of the bears. They box the bears into fables, and they take them to patients at Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. Then just last year, Paige and Samantha, two of our Latin Club officers, we're going to let our slides are off, aren't they? There we go. Paige and Samantha, two of our club officers, decided they wanted to pursue a grant. They said, hey, we want to get a grant for something. Didn't really know what they wanted at first. So they pursued getting a grant from the United Way of Central Indiana. Their goal was to build a literacy garden behind one of our elementary schools. They wanted to sculpt a garden based on classical literature, build picnic tables and benches for students to come out and read, weatherproof bookcases filled with Spanish and English books. It's a high Spanish-speaking population at that school. Weatherproof bookcases. I didn't do a thing. I went to a couple of meetings and watched, and I just turned them loose. And I wasn't surprised at all, but they were terribly excited when they got $1,600 from the United Way to see their project become a reality. And so I'm going to ask you, what will you do to inspire your students to go beyond the charted boundaries of the curriculum? Now, because I see teaching as a shared journey, the greatest rewards for me are the discussions that arise from student observations. I love it when a student, and maybe I know this is more of a high school thing, but when a student stays after class or talks to me in a passing period about something that's gone on, something we've talked about. I love that. Current students and former students are constantly tagging me on Facebook, and very often with the line, "This made me think of you, Mr. Perkins." It's some article they found, some new discovery in archaeology, or who knows what about the ancient world comes across their screen. And that immediately then cycles back into the classroom as I share that with others. And I've got to share with you a comment from just 2 summers ago. One of our young ladies, Hannah, posted this in our Facebook group, beginning of the summer. She just finished first year Latin. She says, "I wanted you all to know that I really enjoyed this year. I found a home in this language and this club. I found a family in my class and my club mates. Latin was always something I look forward to every day. I love being a part of it." There it is. The Latin experience at North Central is about family. It's about home. And that's as it should be. Because in every culture across time, the home and the family have been the locus and the focus of education. But we all know that not every child's physical home is as it should be. As both pedagogus and magister, a teacher has to strive to create such an environment. Several years ago, I once noticed one of my young ladies. She came in, and I noticed she had her hair combed very differently. It was all down over her face. And you just knew something was wrong. And I asked her about it. She pulled her hair up, and she showed me the cut she'd received right along the edge from an argument she'd had with her mother before school. And I had the honor of escorting her down to the guidance office. A couple years ago, I had another young lady who almost every single morning would come to see me to talk about some issue with her mom, her abusive stepdad. And multiple times I had the privilege of providing her with some money for lunch. I say that these interactions were honors and privileges, because who was I to be entrusted with a student's heart and life? And the answer is that I'm a teacher. To be sure, this is one of the most difficult times in which to be a teacher. You're not blind to that. I hope you're not blind to that. I saw it most distinctly a few years ago. We were working a high school conference, teachers and students like you, students who were ed majors and were going to become Latin teachers. And as one young lady was with me in a room, we were waiting for the high school students to come in. And she said, "Is it really as bad as everyone is saying?" Here was a young lady who'd been inspired to become a teacher. She'd had a great Latin program in high school. She wanted to be a teacher. Yet hearing the people who would become her colleagues talk about all the things going on in education, she paused and she wondered, is this really the thing for me? There exists at almost every level of society the belief that education in the United States is broken and the teachers are not doing their jobs. The exact origin of that perception is, of course, impossible to identify, but it's been promulgated through news outlets, social media, and the halls of government. At the conclusion of one of his defense speeches, Cicero, again, observed that when people are bombarded at all hours by news of violence, then even those of the most gentle nature lose their sense of humanity. And the same thing is true of teachers and education. When we continually hear that schools are failing and teachers are the principal cause, even those of us who know better begin to lose heart. And that leads to more dire consequences. Because when teachers leave the profession, it is costly. And friends, it's not just costly in the accounting spreadsheet. In an increasingly unstable world, students need confidence that their school community is going to be much the same next year as it was the year before. There's safety and comfort in a stable learning environment. And that safety and comfort provide gifts of an estimable value as we try to lead students to learn what we know they need to learn. Now, here's the deal. You have already taken a stand. You've already stepped into the gap as ed majors. About the year 510 BC, there was an army marching towards Rome. And the Senate realized that there was only one way into the city. It was across a bridge. And they knew that at the bottleneck at the other end of the bridge, if they could just get two or three warriors to stand at the other end of the bridge, the Senate and everybody else could chop down the bridge, and the enemy could not get into the city. And a man named Horatius stood up and said, "Who will stand on my right hand and keep the bridge with me?" You're doing it. You stepped into that gap, you stepped into that breach by saying that you want to be teachers. You boldly declared that the most important thing that you could do with a life, your life, is to be a teacher. And for that reason, you will transform education. When my students and I talk about issues of leadership, we often compare people like Alexander the Great versus the Roman Emperor Augustus. Alexander conquered more territory. He gave rise to more fantastic legends, and in general was the more sensational of the two. Yet his kingdom fell apart into fragments when he died. Augustus, when he died, left an empire that lasted for another 500 years. That's true. We need great teachers to do fantastic and marvelous things. But we also need teachers to embrace a responsibility beyond the walls of their classroom. And for me, this has taken 3 different forms. I've had the opportunity to publish numerous articles and books, many of which have been designed to help teachers and people in education lead students in different directions. And I think there's this impression that you can only publish if you're a professor, if you're at the university, and that is simply not true. Friends, find the journals in your subject areas, or find the journals in education that take wide-ranging submissions, and consider publishing. And you may say, right now, they're not going to accept anything from me. And you know what? You may be right. They may not the first time or the second time, but keep after it. Because you're going to have something to say that other people need to hear. The second area for me has come through various conference presentations. I've been fortunate to present at state, local, national stuff, AP conferences, foreign language conferences, and now it's Indiana Teacher of the Year. And here's the deal. I didn't always know what I was doing. The best piece of advice I got was from my supervising teacher during student teaching. Supervising teacher was Joanne Arthur, and it was Bloomington South High School. Went to IU for undergraduate. And Joanne told me, she said, when anybody asks you to do something, you say yes, even if you have no idea how to do it. You're smart, you'll figure it out. That's you. You're smart. You'll figure it out. Say yes to it. Dive in with both feet. Third way in which I've been able to have an effect on the education profession has been through mentoring of undergraduates, pre-student teaching and student teaching experiences. And I got to tell you, this has had an opportunity for me to really reflect on my own teaching. My most recent student teacher was in spring of 2013. She was one of my former students, and so it was neat to have her back as a student teacher. The really interesting part is she's completely blind. So we had to navigate, what does that mean? And suddenly I'm rethinking all kinds of things, and not just at the theory level, but I'm rethinking practical, daily stuff. How you move around the room, how you communicate with children, how do you see what's going on if something as bad is taking place. And you may be thinking, how can I mentor somebody? I'm just we got some freshmen here, all the way up through the grades. Think back to when you were a child. Did you ever daydream about being a teacher? Just curious, how many people daydreamed about being a teacher when you were a kid? I did. I remember keeping a list. In fact, I blogged about it a little while back. I kept a list when I was in 5th grade. I had this great 5th grade teacher, Mr. Lang. And I kept a list of things I wanted to do when I became a teacher. And it's stuff like don't let kids throw paper wads and, have extra pencils for them, stuff that Mr. Lang did, right? Keep a list now. Keep a blog. Put that stuff out there. The stuff that you're learning and discovering now. It's important, and somebody else is going to want to read that. Maybe next year's freshmen are going to want to read what you are going through right now. Well, where does that leave us? Simply put, teachers have a mandate to embrace and address the something more of humanity. That meat-only view is not only inaccurate, it's dangerous. I'm going to guess that most of you don't know the 1955 Tennessee Ernie Ford Classic 16 tons. Google it. Check it out on YouTube. But it's got a great verse in it. It's about coal mining. It's got a great verse in it. Some people say a man is made out of mud. Poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood and skin and bone, a mind that's weak and a back that's strong. If that view is accurate, then any kind of slavery, injustice, and inhumanity can be justified. Yet in our better moments, we as people have known this view to be false. Around 380 BC, Plato wrote his famous Republic, a philosophical dialogue that tries to explore the ideal state. And for Plato, it was only natural to devote 2 books to the topic of education, for he understood that education was linked with justice. He goes on to lay out a program of study that addresses the 3 parts of a human being, the body, the mind, and the soul. Because Plato understood that any curriculum that fails to address the complete person must fall short in preparing that person for all that he or she could become. Hoosiers have known this as well. In our first Constitution of 1816, we listed as our primary purpose the establishment of justice. Article 8, Section 1 of that original Constitution said this: knowledge and learning generally diffused through a community, being essential to the preservation of a free government and spreading the opportunities and advantages of education through the various parts of the country, being highly conducive to this end, it shall be the duty of the General Assembly to provide by law for the improvement of lands for the use of schools, and to apply any funds which may be raised to the accomplishment of the grand object for which they are or may be intended. In Article 8, Section 1 of our current Indiana Constitution, we read this: it shall be the duty of the General Assembly to encourage by all suitable means moral, intellectual, scientific, and agricultural improvement. Friends, times change, but truth does not. From 4th century BC Athens to 21st century Indiana, human beings have known that education must be nothing less than the development of the whole person. And we hear so much about STEM these days. Of course, you know, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But I'm reminded of what Jeff Charbonneau said here at Taylor last year. If everybody was here, you may remember this. Jeff said, why don't we add an A to STEM, start teaching the arts and make STEAM? Right? And why don't we add reading to STEAM, put in an R and make it STREAM? And why don't we just add the rest of the alphabet and teach the whole child? Jeff had it right. Jeff had it right. Homer's Odyssey teaches us that life is not merely about achieving goals, but is equally about the journey to reach them. Yet Odysseus did eventually return to Ithaca. The epic poem ends with his subjects acknowledging his rightful rule. Like the famous Greek hero's wanderings, education knows both enchantments and challenges. And like every Odyssey, it has its proper end. In a day in which education often seems under attack from both Scylla and Charybdis, it's easy for those of us on the journey to lose sight of our purpose. Now, in almost all societies, we rightly extol the efforts of scientists who are striving to understand the fundamental workings of the universe. We give them Nobel Prizes, and so we should. We exalt musicians, often requesting their performance for the honoring of kings and presidents. We honor our doctors, our police officers, our firefighters. We mourn their losses and celebrate their successes. To think then that what takes place in our schools is anything less or other than a necessary component of the human euphony is short-sighted in the extreme. Like any act of creation, teaching is a distinct act of humanity. It's part of our greatness, and it's to be participated in by all who will. The Latin word for teacher, magister, suggests the master of a subject, and yet its etymology reveals something else. Quite literally, it means one who does more. And in this, it comes closest to defining what we must do at this moment when education is so greatly misunderstood. Our calling is not to do more in the sense of something additional, but in the sense of something greater. It's what great teachers have always done. We must challenge the perspectives of our students by helping them see themselves not just as workers, but as human beings, and guiding them to understand their own role in education. We have to change the perspective of fellow teachers, helping each other to see ourselves not as mere meat to fulfill a curricular mandate, but as true magistri, answering one of the most noble of all human callings. We must change the perspective of our communities, leading them to see the truth of what they have asked us to do, which is nothing short of securing their legacy and ensuring that the story of the human race continues on that shared journey of discovery. There's something more to which we have a right. It's not honor, it's not title, it's not material possession. is this. It's the right to go beyond what so many voices are claiming as the limit of what a teacher can and should be. As human beings engaged in that most human of all activities, to lead and guide others, to experience the deep mysteries of life and all that we've discovered about it. We can be more than teachers. We can be magistri. And now here comes the quiz. Did you hear what was underneath all of that? Behind it? Riding over the top of it? Surrounding it? Everything that I've just been going on about for the last, I don't know, however long it was. It was our Christian faith, friends. Our Christian faith informed every single thing that I've just said. I said earlier that I've been looking forward to this talk more than any other, and I mean it. Because this is the first talk I've been able to give as Indiana Teacher of the Year, where I could be frank and upfront about my relationship with Jesus Christ in the context of education. In any other venue, I would have been strong-armed off the stage. And when I found out that I was going to be able to unpack a little bit here, I'm like, yes, finally, we get to actually speak and talk about the whole truth. Because here's the deal. Jesus Christ and my relationship with him both inform every single thing that I do in the classroom. How could it be otherwise? As a Christian, you can't be a Christian over here and not over there, right? We know that. It informs absolutely every single thing that I do. There's some of you may know, I don't know if you've read his stuff or not, Richard John Neuhaus, one of the best thinkers of the 20th century, died not too long ago. Former Lutheran pastor turned Catholic priest. Fantastic thinker. Wrote a wonderful book called Death on a Friday Afternoon. It's about the 7 last words of Christ. And one of his statements has always stuck with me. He said, if what Christians say about Good Friday is true, then it is quite simply the truth about everything. Abraham Kuyper, Reformed theologian, said this: there's not a square inch in the whole domain of our human experience over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. Every single thing belongs to him. If 2 plus 2 actually does equal 4, then that truth is somehow, in a way I don't fundamentally understand, is somehow rooted in the one who said, I am the truth. Now, I don't start off with the Lord's Prayer. I don't sign off with the Nicene Creed when I talk at other venues. But I do talk about truth, goodness, and beauty. Many of the things that you heard here tonight. And every bit of that is informed and shaped by Christ Jesus. And those who have ears to hear will hear. So right now I want to take a moment and just share a few specific areas where my relationship with him and he in my life has shaped particular things in my teaching. I want to start off with curriculum. Folks, there's just some things I'm not going to read with high school students. I'm not going to do it. There's a lot of classical literature, and not all of it needs to be read. Not all of it needs to be read in a high school setting. And I know English colleagues, and I'm looking at some of the English curriculum, and I'm seeing some of the books, and students are sharing with me, I don't really enjoy reading this, and next thing I know I'm looking at it, I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. We're doing this in high school? There's some things I'm not going to teach. And I don't care if it's on the curriculum or not. And other things that we do teach, we approach in a particularly Christian way. Again, we're not, like I say, signing off with the Lord's Prayer, but issues of leadership, issues of service, we're going to tease that out of what we do. We're going to find ways to bring that out with the kids. We talk about Cicero as our anchor for service for a lot of our projects, but the simple fact of the matter is, we wouldn't be doing any of that stuff if I didn't want to find a way to help those kids serve because I understand my role as a servant leader. Prayer is the second area I want to talk about. I don't know what your prayer life is right now, but ramp it up. Ramp it up. Every day that I drive onto the campus of North Central High School, I'm praying for our school, I'm praying for our kids. When students are taking a test or a quiz and I'm walking around making sure nobody's cheating, right? I'm also praying, Lord, help them remember the things they know. And on the things they don't know, help them to do their best. I'm praying for students, I'm praying for colleagues, I'm praying for leaders I was talking with a friend very recently. We're talking about some bad leadership that we see in education these days. I said, we got to pray for these people. How do we expect them to lead if they're not walking as a regenerate person in the blood of Jesus Christ? So we need to pray for those leaders as well. Throw this one at you. It can get dark, spiritually dark. My wife has noticed in me that there's some stuff around our school and in our district that really takes me into dark places. And sometimes I'm thinking it's just me. I've been doing this for about a quarter of a century now. Maybe it's just me. And she keeps telling me, no, it's not just you. And I got that outside perspective. The other day I was driving to school and I was so dark mentally. It was bad. It was bad. Brought up the playlist, got some of the old hymns. Got Alan Jackson. Just real quick, Alan Jackson's got 2 great CDs of hymns, classic hymns. And some of you guys, I don't know if you maybe didn't grow up with the hymns, maybe grew up with the praise courses and that, but get the hymns. The hymns are, you remember. Hit my playlist of Alan Jackson's hymns. By the time I got to school, I was in such a different place. Our Lord is a Lord of light and not darkness. Pray as you go into your school. Deeper issues. I talked about helping the young lady with lunch money. Oh, somebody else might have done that, but I did it because of Jesus Christ. I found ways to speak to her about Christ. You can do that even in a public school. Sometimes I'll float a little thing out there. I'll say, so do you go to church anywhere? No, that's not a barometer of anything, but it just lets me know off the top of it, are you going to be open to something like this? And she said, yeah, sometimes. Boom, that was the opportunity. And I could say some things to her that maybe I couldn't say to some others. Had the opportunity to walk a young lady down the aisle a couple years ago. Dad wasn't in the picture, and she and her mom asked me to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Those are the deeper relationships that you're going to get into because you're following Jesus Christ. And you don't see this as a 9-to-5 job. This isn't about evaluations, and it's not about your contract, but it's about something deeper in those deeper relationships. It's about human interactions. It's about giving time to everyone. I get so tired. Oh my goodness, do I get tired. And the last thing I want is one particularly, a clingy kid. I don't want to hear from a clingy kid after 9th period or 10th period. I'm done. I'm tired. I don't want to hear your stuff right now. But I'm never going to let you know that. I'm going to smile. I'm going to listen. I'm going to look you in the eye. And I had one young lady who was one of those kids. And my next door neighbor at the time, one day, she said, after the young lady left, she says, I don't know how you do it. She's like, I couldn't listen to that every day. And my only thought is, Jesus listens to me. How am I not going to listen? How am I not going to give that kind of time? At the same time, even Jesus got away, right? Even Jesus knew how to get away. Friends, the teaching, you're going to have so much drawn out of you. You've got to find ways to put that back in. You've got to find good, positive ways. Friends, go sing a song, karaoke night, go socialize, go read a book if that's your thing, nice hot cup of tea. But you've got to do that, and you've got to be intentional about it. Because next thing you know, you're going to be sucked dry, and then you've got nothing to give. And then that's when people start moving into trouble. Because then they're going to find other things to fill that gap because they're so desperate. And maybe they're going to find less desirable means. Last thing is encouraging the Christian kids. I don't know what your goals are if you want to teach in a Christian school or teach in a public school. But if you teach in a public school, the Christian kids need some encouragement. And maybe not everywhere. You know what? I don't know. Some of the schools I know, some of the schools, particularly some of our rural schools, there's a Christian vibe that's right out there in front. A lot of our urban schools, that's not the case. So find a way to encourage them. Maybe you see they've got a youth group shirt on. You see they're reading some Christian book. You see a Christian artist, CD, so comment on it. Oh, you went to Winter Jam? So did I. And next thing you know, there's a little bit, you're building into them, you're feeding them, and they know here's a place where it's safe and where I can be encouraged in my walk. I'm going to close it up with a talk about Miss Rank. Miss Rank is the reason I'm a teacher. Only had her for 2 years, sophomore and junior year. She retired at the end of my junior year to marry her high school sweetheart. She'd never been married. And she retired at 60-some-odd years old. She's 92 now, still lives in Michigan, and she and I are in great contact. One day, I'd always known I wanted to be a teacher. One day, she made an offhand reference at New Albany High School, which is a public high school, oldest high school in the state of Indiana. She made an offhand reference to Antioch being the first place where anyone was ever called a Christian. Acts 11:26. And it was almost as if Jesus was speaking to me physically right there. I almost heard this voice saying, you could teach this subject and be a subversive Christian presence in public schools. That's why I'm doing what I do. Along the way, I discovered what's really become my primary verse. Isaiah 50, verse 4. And you got to pardon me, I did read it and memorize it in the Latin. That's where I first discovered it. Then I looked it up in the English. Yeah, it's pretty good in the English too. But in the Latin is how I know it. Dominus dedet mihi linguam eruditam, ut scium sustentare eam qui lassus est verbo. The Lord has given me an educated tongue, so that I may know how to sustain with a word the one who's grown weary. That's what teachers do. And I appreciate you letting me have an evening to share some of that with you. And I'm happy to take Q&A or anything that you guys have got. So whatever you like. It's all yours.
Do you guys have any questions?